Husband pushed his wife out because his mother ordered it, unaware she was paying the $4,800 rent and owned their mansion. He didn't just ask her to leave. He pushed her out, suitcase in hand, because his mother said so. In front of the open door, with neighbors whispering and his mother smiling, Daniel pressed his palm to Emily's shoulder and forced her over the threshold of the very home she scrubbed, lit, and protected. "Get out," he said flatly. "Mom's staying. You're not." Those were the words that cut deeper than any storm. Instead of choosing his wife, he chose control. Instead of truth, he chose pride. His mother, Margaret, stood behind him like a judge, and a woman in red heels drifted in the hall like a shadow of what came next. He thought he had power. What he never knew, what neither of them knew, was that the woman they tossed aside was the one paying the $4,800 rent every month. He didn't know she had signed the papers, sealed the deed, and placed their mansion under her company's name. He didn't know the foundation he stood on was hers. Sometimes the person you push out is the person who owns the door. This is not just another tale of betrayal. It is the sound of a heart breaking and hardening at once. It is a quiet ledger of sacrifice, late nights, hidden transfers, silent signatures turning into justice you can't outrun. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, her voice risks fading back into silence. When you subscribe, you stand with every woman who carried a home on her back and was still told to leave. Please, subscribe now. And in the comments, share where you're watching from. The next page turns fast because what she did next shocked them all. The knife hit the wooden board with rhythmic precision, thud, 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 as Emily Parker sliced strawberries in perfect halves. The golden morning light flooded through the large kitchen windows, catching the shimmer of her wedding ring as she moved. For a moment, the mansion looked like the picture of peace, warm light, quiet music, and the smell of fresh coffee. But peace, in Emily's life, was something she had to build, not something freely given. At 32, Emily was the kind of woman who made calm look easy. A financial consultant with a quiet strength, she carried herself with the discipline of someone who had rebuilt herself before. Behind every gentle smile, there were years of sacrifice, late-night work, and unspoken endurance. To everyone else, she looked like a lucky wife living in luxury. Only she knew that this mansion, every wall, every polished marble tile, stood because she made it possible. She glanced at the digital clock above the oven. 7:02 a.m. Daniel would be down any minute. Her phone buzzed beside the coffee maker, a message alert. She wiped her hands and picked it up. It was a payment confirmation. $4,800 rent paid successfully. Emily stared at the screen for a moment, her chest tightening. Another quiet secret. Another month of keeping her husband's pride intact. A quick flash crossed her mind 1 year ago. Daniel losing his job after the company downsized. She remembered his shaking hands, his broken pride. "Don't tell anyone, Em. Not even Mom. I'll find something soon," she had smiled back then. "Of course," she'd said. "We'll handle it together." But together had slowly turned into alone. She hid the truth easily. Her firm paid her well, and she took extra contracts under her company name, funneling the mansion rent through an LLC she'd quietly registered. Daniel never asked how the bills were handled, and she never told him. Protecting him was her way of loving him. Emily poured his coffee just the way he liked, black with a hint of sugar. She placed it beside his plate and looked around the bright kitchen. The home was spotless. The smell of cinnamon toast filled the air. She checked the bank app again, sighing softly. "Another month," she whispered. The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from the daily tension she could never quite name. Daniel entered, tall, in his mid-30s, handsome but hardened by frustration. His hair was messy, his shirt half-tucked, and his phone glued to his ear. "Good morning," she said gently, offering a smile. He didn't respond. His jaw was tight. "Yeah, Mom. I told you, I'll handle it," he said into the phone, pacing near the counter. His tone wasn't the usual one. It was sharp, defensive. "No, she doesn't need to know that. Just—" His eyes flicked toward Emily before turning away. "Yeah, I'll tell her what you said." He hung up abruptly and exhaled. Emily wiped her hands on a towel. "Everything okay?" Daniel's expression softened just a bit, but the distance in his eyes remained. "It's Mom. She's just worried about us. Worried? Emily asked, tilting her head slightly. About what? He looked down at the coffee she'd made, then up at her with a strange tension behind his smile. She just thinks, maybe things would be easier if you weren't working so much, that I should handle things again. Emily blinked, confused. Handle what, exactly? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again. His mother's name flashed on the screen. Mom calling. Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. Yes, Mom, he said, walking toward the hallway. His tone grew quieter, then harder. No, I haven't told her yet. Emily's eyes followed him as he disappeared into the other room, the warmth of the morning suddenly feeling thinner. She turned back to the counter, her reflection staring at her from the polished marble surface. For the first time that morning, her smile faded. The house was still, but the silence carried weight, the kind that warned of something coming. She reached for her phone again, scrolling through her payment history. The numbers blurred. She whispered under her breath, maybe one day he'll remember who really built this home. From the hallway, Daniel's voice rose, sharp and impatient. I told you, Mom, I'll make her understand. Emily froze mid-motion. Her eyes widened slightly. The sound of his words cut deeper than the edge of any knife. Outside, a gentle breeze brushed through the curtains, and the sunlight dimmed just enough to feel like a warning. She didn't know it yet, but that phone call was the first crack in her world. In the next room, Daniel's mother's voice hissed, her words venomous, and her next demand would change everything. The mansion's living room was too quiet for a Saturday afternoon, the kind of quiet that hummed with hidden tension. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish, and the lavender candles Emily had lit earlier, hoping to make it'd feel normal. But normal had stopped existing the moment she arrived. At the center of the room, Daniel sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, eyes darting between his mother and the floor. His mother, Margaret Parker, stood like she owned the air itself, elegant in a crisp beige suit, her expression sharp and cold. 61, but her presence filled every inch of the house. She was the kind of woman who smiled like a blade, and everyone who knew her understood that behind every deer there was an insult waiting to be unwrapped. Emily stood near the kitchen archway, drying her hands with a towel, unsure whether to speak or disappear. Margaret's voice sliced through the silence. So this is what my son's home looks like now? She glanced around, lips pressed. All this, soft furniture, scented candles, girlish colors, it's like a spa, not a man's house. Daniel rubbed his temples. Mom, please. She cut him off sharply. No, Daniel. You've changed, and I can see why. Her eyes landed on Emily. You've let her run everything, haven't you? My son, taking orders from a woman who doesn't even belong in his world. Emily's throat tightened. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could almost hear it in her ears. Margaret turned fully toward her, her smile curving like a hook. Emily, dear, I'm sure you mean well. But Daniel was raised in a family that knows class, stability, tradition, and this, she gestured around the room, doesn't reflect that. Daniel shifted, looking ashamed but saying nothing. Emily steadied her voice. Mrs. Parker, I understand you care about him, but this house is our home. We built it together. Margaret laughed softly, a cold, dismissive sound. Built? My dear, this mansion was built on my son's hard work. I helped fund his first business, you know. Without me, none of this would exist. Emily froze. His first business? The one that failed 2 years ago? She knew the story Margaret had given Daniel, a loan that turned into a leash. Emily had tried to help Daniel rebuild quietly afterward, never mentioning that her savings kept the mortgage paid. Daniel cleared his throat, uneasy. Mom, we appreciate your help, but maybe what? Margaret snapped. Maybe I should keep quiet while this woman spends your money decorating the place like a dollhouse. Or should I stay silent while she plays career woman while she caught herself, lowering her tone while you're trying to get back on your feet. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. Enough, Mom. But Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough for both of them to hear. You're losing yourself, Daniel. You used to be strong, ambitious. Look at you now. Letting her run the house, the finances, your life. Is that the man I raised? Emily blinked, her breath shallow. She wanted to scream, to tell her the truth that Daniel hadn't paid a cent toward this house in a year. But she stayed silent, heartbreaking at the sight of him shrinking under his mother's words. Margaret's tone softened, but her eyes glittered. I'm only saying this because I love you. A wife like that. She let the sentence dangle, turning toward the window as if the view held the rest of her thought. Will only drag you down. Emily took a step forward. Mrs. Parker, Margaret's hand shot up, silencing her. Enough, dear. You've said quite enough for one day. She turned back to Daniel and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch deliberate, claiming, You deserve peace, son. You've sacrificed enough. Daniel's chest rose and fell, his eyes darting between them. A long pause hung heavy. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Margaret leaned close to her son's ear. She doesn't deserve you, Daniel. Tell her to leave. The words struck like lightning, silent but destructive. Emily's hand dropped to her side, the towel slipping to the floor. Daniel's lips parted not in anger, but hesitation. The look in his eyes wasn't just confusion, it was weakness. Outside, wind pressed against the glass panes, the soft sound of distant thunder rolling through. Margaret smiled faintly, turning toward Emily with a practiced kindness. Now, dear, don't look so startled. Sometimes a woman must know when she's no longer wanted. Emily didn't reply. Her gaze shifted to Daniel, waiting for him to defend her. But his silence was answer enough. And in that stillness, she understood something new. Margaret wasn't trying to protect her son, she was trying to own him. Emily stepped back slowly, her expression calm but her eyes burning. From the corner of the room, the sound of Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced down, her lips curling. Sophie's on her way, she said lightly. The name hit the air like poison. And though no one spoke, the tension in the room thickened as if the walls themselves had just learned the truth of what was coming next. Some guests bring flowers, others bring storms. The crash of a wineglass shattered through the quiet dining room. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth like spilled blood. Emily froze where she stood, her hands trembling slightly, eyes darting between Daniel and his mother. Dinner had started with silence and ended with war. The table was set beautifully, candles flickering, roasted chicken untouched, soft music humming low. But nothing about this evening felt alive. Daniel sat at the head of the table, his jaw locked, his eyes cold. Beside him, Margaret reclined with the composure of someone who already knew she'd won. Emily stood near the counter, clutching her napkin tightly, her voice barely holding steady. I don't understand what this is about. Why are you both acting like I don't belong? Here? Margaret gave a quiet, cruel smile. Because, my dear, you don't. Emily blinked, her voice trembling. Excuse me? Daniel exhaled, refusing to meet her eyes. Emily, Mom's going to stay here for a while. It's her house, too. You should, maybe go stay somewhere else for now. Her body went still, her mind unable to process the words. What? She whispered. You want me to leave my own home? Margaret leaned forward, her tone sharp and commanding. He's not asking, Emily. He's telling you. You've had your turn here. Now it's time you stop pretending you're in charge. Emily's eyes burned with disbelief. Daniel, please tell me you're not agreeing to this. But Daniel didn't move. His hands rested on the table, clenched into fists. Margaret's voice cut through again. Daniel, say it clearly. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple twitching. Emily, he said, voice low and strained. You need to move out. Tonight. The air left Emily's lungs in one sharp gasp. You're pushing me out of my home? It's my mother's decision, he said without looking up. The words felt like knives. Margaret stood now, walking slowly toward Emily, her heels tapping softly against the floor. You've had him under your spell long enough. I warned him you'd bring him down. And now, I'll clean up the mess you made. Emily stepped back, tears gathering in her eyes but her voice rising, raw and human. You don't even know what you're talking about. I've held this family together when no one else did. While you were out bragging about your son, I was the one paying the bills. Margaret's expression didn't flinch. Lies, she said simply. Daniel, don't let her manipulate you. Daniel stood up, his voice shaking. Just go, Emily. I'm not leaving, she whispered. Not this house. Not tonight. Margaret turned sharply to her son, her tone sharp as a whip. Daniel! Something in him snapped. I said go, he shouted, slamming his hands on the table. The candles flickered violently. Emily flinched. The sound echoed through the hallway. Through the open window, neighbors 2 doors down paused, their murmurs soft under the crickets outside. Margaret gave a small, approving nod. That's my boy, she murmured. Emily turned to Daniel, eyes wide with heartbreak. You're really doing this because she told you to? He avoided her gaze, his breathing uneven. Just go, Emily, please. Her tears finally fell. Slowly, she reached for her bag, the one she'd left on the counter hours ago, and walked toward the stairs. Each step felt like walking through water. As she reached the bedroom, her mind flickered through flashes, memory after memory. The night Daniel lost his job and cried on her lap. Her transferring money to the landlord every month so he wouldn't know. Signing the property papers through her company name just in case something like this ever happened. A quiet strength started to rise beneath the heartbreak. She pulled open the drawer, grabbed the slim black folder labeled Parker Estate, and slipped it into her bag. Her tears had dried. Downstairs, she could hear Margaret whispering to Daniel, her voice smooth, victorious. You did the right thing. She was holding you back. Emily appeared at the top of the staircase, suitcase in hand, her face calm now, eerily calm. You may have pushed me out, she said softly, but you'll never truly own what you think you do. Margaret tilted her head, smirking. Oh, I already do, dear. Emily walked past them, her heels steady, her voice low but firm. You'll see. As the door closed behind her, Daniel sank back into his chair, his mother's hand resting proudly on his shoulder. Outside, Emily stood in the dark driveway, the night air cool on her skin. The lights from the mansion flickered behind her like distant ghosts. She whispered to herself, let them enjoy their new home. For now. From inside, Margaret's laughter carried faintly through the window, high, cold, satisfied. But underneath it, something else stirred. The faint creak of pipes, the house's heartbeat shifting, as if it already knew its true owner was the one walking away. In the distance, headlights approached the arrival of another woman, someone Margaret had been expecting. The screech of car tires broke the silence of the morning. A sleek black convertible pulled into the mansion driveway, sunlight glinting off its polished surface. From the driver's side stepped a woman in red heels, confident, stylish, and far too comfortable walking into a home that wasn't hers. Sophie Grant, 28, was Daniel's business associate. That's what he'd always called her. Emily remembered the name, the one that used to pop up on his phone late at night when he said he was working. Now Sophie stood outside Emily's mansion, her suitcase in hand, smiling as Margaret opened the door wide. Welcome, dear, Margaret said warmly. You must be exhausted. Come in, Daniel's waiting. The two women hugged as if they'd known each other for years. It was a sharp contrast to the cold politeness Margaret had always reserved for Emily. Inside the car parked across the street, Emily watched through tinted windows. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her heart thundering. She had come back only to pick up a few forgotten documents, but what she saw instead froze her blood. Sophie. Of course it was Sophie. A wave of memories hit her, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on Daniel's collar, the nights he'd turned his phone face down, the messages he deleted too quickly. All the signs she'd chosen to ignore out of love and hope. Her chest ached, but the tears didn't come. Not this time. Inside, Daniel appeared at the doorway, hesitant but smiling weakly as Sophie stepped in. He looked smaller now, unsure, but he let his mother guide the moment. Margaret placed a hand on Sophie's back and said, "Now this is a woman who knows how to support a man's career." Daniel's jaw tensed. "Mom," but Sophie interjected, her tone syrup sweet. "Oh, please. I'm just here to help him get back on track." Margaret laughed, the sound sharp. "You're already doing more than that other one ever did." Daniel didn't respond. He walked away toward the living room, pretending to busy himself with unpacking boxes that Emily had once labeled with love. Sophie followed him, her hand brushing his arm, and he didn't pull away. From outside, Emily's eyes narrowed. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked calm, almost detached, but a storm raged behind her stillness. She watched Sophie touch the doorknob she had polished 1,000 times, watched Margaret's approving smile, watched Daniel's hesitation melt into compliance. She could almost hear Margaret's voice in her head. This house was never yours. Emily finally exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the car window. You're right, she whispered. It's mine. Her hand reached into the passenger seat, pulling the thin black folder she had kept safe all week, the property papers. Her name, bold and legal, printed across the top. Inside the mansion, Sophie twirled her keys on her finger, laughing softly. Feels like home already, Margaret smiled. It should, dear. It's all yours now. Emily's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Not for long, she murmured. She started the engine, the car humming quietly as she drove off, the mansion shrinking in the rearview mirror. The setting sun painted the house in orange light, beautiful, deceitful, temporary. And somewhere behind the glass, Sophie's laughter echoed faintly, the sound of a woman stepping into a life that wasn't truly hers. But even laughter, Emily thought, sounds different when the ground beneath you doesn't belong to you, because soon the ground itself would move. The apartment door slammed shut behind Emily, the echo sharp against the bare walls. She leaned against it, chest rising and falling, her pulse still racing from what she had seen. Sophie in her home, Margaret in her kitchen, Daniel watching it happen. The apartment was small, quiet, and nothing like the mansion she had built her dreams around. But it was hers, free of their voices, free of their control. Still, the silence pressed against her ears, demanding she face what had just happened. She dropped her purse on the counter and walked toward the window. From the 12th floor, the city lights looked distant, like scattered promises. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, slowly. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. Emily Davis? The voice said on the other end. Yes? This is Rachel Moore. Emily's shoulders relaxed slightly. Rachel was more than her lawyer. She was an old college friend, sharp and loyal. Emily hadn't heard from her in weeks. Rachel continued, I got your message about needing the property documents checked. I went through everything you sent me. Emily. Her tone shifted, calm, but edged with surprise. You do realize the deed to that mansion is still under your LLC, right? Emily blinked, frozen. What? Rachel laughed softly, disbelief in her voice. You bought that house through your consulting company, not jointly. The mortgage, the taxes, the ownership, all under Davis Consulting Holdings, LLC, and you're the sole shareholder. Meaning, Emily whispered, barely breathing. I own it. Rachel smiled through the phone. Exactly. You don't rent it, you own it. Completely. The words hit like electricity, running through her spine, awakening something fierce. She pressed a hand to her chest, almost afraid to believe it. A flood of memories came rushing back, sitting with her accountant 2 years ago, taking advice to purchase the property under her business for tax advantages. She'd done it quietly, never realizing how much that decision would one day protect her. Rachel's voice softened. You don't have to let them walk over you, Emily. You have all the power legally and financially. They're living in your mansion. Emily's eyes sharpened. The fear, the pain, the humiliation, it all began to dissolve. In its place rose something colder, steadier. I see, she said slowly. So, if I stop making payments, they'll lose everything within days, Rachel finished, and they won't even see it coming. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The air in the apartment felt different now, charged, alive. Emily walked to the table, found the black folder she'd been carrying since that night, and opened it. Her name, Emily Davis Parker, glimmered across the top of every page. Her reflection in the glass window stared back at her, no longer broken, no longer pleading. A quiet smile touched her lips, the kind that carried both pain and power. Let them enjoy their last night, she whispered. Rachel hesitated. Emily, what are you planning? Emily closed the folder gently, the click of the lock echoing like a final decision. I'm not planning anything, she said softly. I'm simply taking back what's mine. Outside, lightning flashed faintly in the distance, not violent, but promising. And somewhere across the city, in that grand mansion glowing in the dark, the people who had pushed her out were sitting at her table, laughing over her dinner, unaware that by sunrise, the walls around them would start to crumble. Because sometimes revenge doesn't arrive screaming. Sometimes it knocks politely with a lawyer's letter in hand. The sound of laughter echoed Through the grand halls of the mansion, loud, hollow, and out of place. Dishes clinked, champagne fizzed, and music played from the living room speakers. Sophie twirled across the marble floor in her silk robe, holding a glass high. "To new beginnings," she cheered. Margaret clapped lightly, eyes glinting with satisfaction. "To family finally restored," she said proudly, lifting her own glass. Daniel smiled weakly, seated on the couch, pretending to enjoy it. He looked around the house, Emily's house, but something about it felt wrong. The air didn't carry the warmth it once did. It was too quiet in the corners, too cold even in light. A faint drip, drip, drip came from the kitchen sink. He frowned, turning his head toward the sound. The faucet was leaking again, strange, since Emily had fixed it just a month before. "Daniel," Sophie called playfully, waving her glass. "Don't look so gloomy. You should be grateful. Everything's working out. You have your mom, your career's getting back on track," he interrupted her softly. "And Emily?" The name made Margaret stiffen. "We agreed not to talk about her," she said, her tone sharp. "She's gone, and good riddance. That woman poisoned this home." Sophie smirked. "Besides, she's not your problem anymore. You have me now." Daniel forced a smile, but the guilt was plain in his eyes. He took a slow sip of wine, but it didn't wash away the taste of regret. From the window, sunlight spilled across the dining table, catching a small pile of unopened mail. Margaret noticed and reached for it. "Bills, bills," she muttered, flipping through the envelopes. Then she stopped at one marked in bold, "Notice of lease non-renewal." "What's this?" she murmured, opening it. Daniel looked up. "Probably junk mail," but her face tightened as she read. "It says, 'The lease won't be renewed after this month.'" Sophie frowned. "Lease? What lease?" I thought. This place was paid off. Daniel stood quickly, confusion spreading across his face. "It is. I mean, Emily handled all that." Margaret scoffed. "Handled? You mean she let her name sit on the paperwork while you paid for everything?" He didn't answer. The silence thickened. Margaret waved the letter dismissively and tossed it onto the table. "Nonsense. I'll call the landlord and sort this out." The dripping from the kitchen grew louder, steady and mocking. Drip, drip, drip. Sophie leaned against the wall, bored. "Do whatever you want, Mrs. Parker. Just make sure the pool stays open this weekend. I invited friends over." Margaret didn't even respond. She was already dialing her phone, muttering under her breath. Daniel's eyes wandered to the hallway, to the spot where Emily used to hang her paintings. They were gone now, leaving empty hooks. The walls looked naked, stripped of life. As the phone rang endlessly on speaker, Margaret crossed her arms, annoyed. Ugh, no answer. Typical landlord behavior. They'll regret ignoring me. The faucet gave one last metallic groan and then stopped dripping. Silence. Then faintly a voice. Not in the room, not from the phone, but layered across the narration, calm and cold. "Yes, call the landlord, Margaret. I'd love to hear what she says." The champagne bubbles went flat. The air turned still. Margaret frowned, glancing around the room. "Did you hear that?" Daniel shook his head. "Hear what?" She pressed her lips together, uneasy, then scoffed. "Never mind. I'll call again later." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees. The mansion's lights flickered once, just long enough for the chandelier to shimmer like a warning. Daniel sank back onto the couch, rubbing his forehead. Sophie scrolled on her phone. Margaret stared at the silent phone line, unaware that with every passing hour, their time in that mansion was quietly running out. And somewhere, across town, Emily closed her laptop, watching her lawyer's email notification appear. Lease termination confirmed. Her quiet smile returned. Let the house remind them who it belongs to. The phone rang on speaker, sharp and shrill in the silence. Margaret sat upright on the couch, her eyes blazing. "Honestly, some people don't know who they're dealing with," she muttered. Daniel sat nearby, tense and pale, while Sophie scrolled on her phone, pretending not to care. "Relax, Mother," Daniel said softly. "It's probably just a clerical mistake." "Emily probably forgot to." Margaret's glare cut him off. "Don't you say that woman's name in my house." The irony hung heavy. The call clicked, and a bright, polite voice answered. "Good afternoon, Maple Realty Management. This is Tina speaking. How may I help you today? Yes, Margaret said crisply. This is Margaret Parker. My son and I are living at the Maple Heights property, the mansion on Mean, Willow Lane. We just received a ridiculous notice about lease termination. I'd like to speak with whoever made that error. Of course, the woman replied calmly. Can I have your name again, ma'am? Margaret leaned closer to the speaker. Margaret Parker. My son is Daniel Parker. We've been residents for over a year now. This letter says our lease won't be renewed, which is absurd because we own that house. There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable silence, then the sound of typing. I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker, Tina said finally, her voice polite but firm. According to our system, that property isn't owned by your son. It's managed through a private company. Margaret frowned. Private company? Which company? One moment, please, Tina said, her fingers clicking rapidly in the background. Sophie rolled her eyes. She probably means that fake business Emily used to brag about. Daniel looked down at the floor, his fingers gripping his knees. Tina returned. Yes, the property is under Davis Consulting Holdings, LLC. The owner decided not to renew the lease. Margaret blinked. Owner? There must be some mistake. That woman doesn't own a thing. My son paid for, Tina interrupted gently. Ma'am, I understand this might be confusing, but the decision is final. The owner has all the legal rights to terminate the stay. Margaret's tone hardened. Then I demand to speak directly with this so-called owner. Another brief pause. Papers shuffled. Then the voice on the other end came back, sounding careful, almost hesitant. You can, Mrs. Parker, Tina said. The owner's name is Emily Davis Parker. The room froze. Daniel's head snapped up, color draining from his face. Sophie stopped mid-scroll, eyes wide. Margaret's hand clenched the edge of the couch. What did you just say? She hissed. Emily Davis Parker, Tina repeated gently. She's the listed owner and primary tenant. She made the decision to end the lease effective next week. Margaret's breath came out in short, angry bursts. This is nonsense. She doesn't have the right. I'm afraid she does, Tina said. We've already received her signed authorization. You'll be contacted by our legal department for the handover process. The line went dead with a soft click. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of the chandelier above them. Then Sophie whispered, half in disbelief, half in fear. She owns the house? Margaret stood abruptly, her face pale but her voice trembling with rage. No, she doesn't. This is a game, and I won't let her win. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his voice weak. Mom, what if it's not a game? Margaret turned toward him slowly, eyes narrowing. Then she's about to learn what happens when you humiliate a Parker. Her voice shook the air, a last act of pride before the inevitable fall. Outside, the mansion's lights flickered again, dimming for a moment. And miles away, in her quiet apartment, Emily's phone vibrated with a message from the property manager. Notice delivered successfully. She smiled faintly and whispered to herself, Now, let's see how fast they crumble. And crumble. They would piece by piece. Explain this to me, Daniel's voice thundered through the mansion, his hand gripping the crumpled lease notice. The paper shook as much as his voice. Margaret stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, face hard. Calm yourself, Daniel. This is clearly a mistake. That girl could never afford this house without you. Daniel paced, restless. Then why is her name on every document? Why does the property company recognize her as the owner? His words cracked under the weight of disbelief. Sophie, seated on the couch, tried to stay out of the argument, but her curiosity showed. Maybe she lied to everyone. She said casually, eyes flicking toward the letter. You know how clever she can be. Daniel stopped pacing, his mind spinning. Clever. The word hit him like a sting. Memories flooded in the nights. Emily stayed up late doing extra work. The quiet way she always handled bills, her tired smiles when he bragged to friends about his home. He sank into a chair, voice low. She used to say everything was fine. Even after my company failed, she never once complained. His tone softened, the anger slipping away, replaced by confusion and shame. What if she was the one holding it all together? Margaret's sharp voice cut through. Don't be foolish, Daniel. She's manipulating you. She probably planned this to embarrass us. But Daniel's eyes were distant now, not on his mother, not on Sophie. but on the door Emily once walked out of. Maybe I was wrong, he whispered. He reached for his phone, fingers trembling. He found Emily's name and pressed. Call. It rang once, twice, then voicemail. Her calm voice echoed through the room. Leave a message. Daniel exhaled slowly. Emily, please call me back. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, soft but growing. Some storms don't warn you before they strike. The echo of a punching bag filled the quiet gym, thud, thud, thud. Emily's fists hit harder with every swing, sweat glistening on her skin, breath steady and fierce. The woman who once whispered apologies now moved with focus, not fury. Her pain had turned into rhythm, her heartbreak into power. Weeks had passed since she walked out of the mansion. No more sleepless nights waiting for calls. No more tears. Just silence and rebuilding. By day, she sat in her office, surrounded by paperwork and clients, her calm confidence returning with every deal signed. Her name, Emily Davis Parker, appeared on contracts and company headers, the mark of someone who had quietly owned more than anyone knew. By night, she met with her therapist, a kind, middle-aged woman named Dr. Harris. In one session, Emily stared at her own reflection and said softly, I spent years taking care of everyone else. I forgot how to take care of me. Dr. Harris smiled. You're remembering now. At home, Emily's small apartment had changed. New plants, a painting half finished on the wall, light where there had once been emptiness. She opened her dresser one night, taking out her wedding ring. It gleamed under the lamp, a symbol of both love and loss. She stared at it for a long moment, then placed it gently in the drawer. Some things, she whispered, don't belong to me anymore. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Daniel's frustration grew. Bills piled up, Sophie's voice sharpened, and Margaret's arrogance began to crack. But Emily's world was rising, step by steady step. She sat at her desk one morning, pen in hand, her lawyer on the phone. The document in front of her read, Property transfer, full ownership confirmed. She smiled faintly. Let the curtain rise. And miles away, the walls of her old home began to shake, not from weather, but from fate. The pounding on the door was loud enough to shake the chandelier. Bang! 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 Sophie jolted awake on the couch, her silk robe slipping off her shoulder. Margaret stormed into the hallway, furious, hair unkempt and voice sharp. Who dares knock like that at this hour? Daniel stumbled down the stairs, half-dressed, his face pale. The knocking came again, firmer, colder. Bang! Bang! He opened the door. Two uniformed officers and a man in a dark suit stood outside. The man held a clipboard, his voice calm but authoritative. Good morning. We're here on behalf of Maple Realty Management. This property has been legally repossessed. You need to vacate immediately. Margaret's mouth fell open. Repossessed? Are you insane? This is my son's house. The man handed Daniel a sealed envelope. Eviction notice, effective today. You're required to leave within the hour. Daniel froze, his fingers trembling as he unfolded the papers. His name wasn't on a single line. The ownership section read clearly, Emily Davis Parker. For a long moment, no one breathed. Sophie let out a disbelieving laugh. That can't be right. She left. She doesn't own anything. But the bailiff ignored her. The owner submitted proper documentation weeks ago. We're just here to enforce it. Margaret's face turned red, then white. This is a mistake. My son's wife couldn't possibly. Daniel interrupted quietly, voice breaking. She could. His mind spun with memories, Emily signing forms he never cared to read. Her calm face whenever he said, You wouldn't understand business. All those times he thought she was just a good wife, she was a strategist, a protector, and now, the one holding the strings. Sir, the bailiff said, looking at Daniel, we'll give you some time to gather your things. Margaret stepped forward, trembling with rage. You don't understand, that woman tricked us. I'll call her myself. The officer shook his head. Ma'am, contact won't change the order. The property has been legally transferred. You are trespassing as of this morning. Sophie threw her hands in the air. This is insane. Daniel, say something. He didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the signature at the bottom of the page. Emily's handwriting, steady and deliberate. The truth hit him like a collapse inside his chest. Margaret shouted again. Who does she think she is? Sophie's voice cut through, shrill and panicked. Then who owns this place? And from somewhere outside, a voice soft, calm, unmistakable carried across the morning air. I do. All three turned toward the driveway. Emily stood beside her car, composed and silent, dressed in a simple black suit. Her eyes met Daniel's, and for the first time, he couldn't find a single word. Her presence filled the space, not with anger, but with quiet finality. She didn't need to yell. The silence spoke enough. Margaret's lips quivered. Sophie's expression shattered. Emily took one slow step forward and said, "You wanted me gone. Now it's your turn." The officers stepped aside, ready to do their job. Daniel's shoulders sank as the weight of his choices came crashing down. Emily turned to leave, her voice faint but steady. "Don't worry. I'll make sure you have plenty of time to remember this day." As her car pulled away, the wind picked up, scattering the eviction papers across the lawn. Margaret screamed after her, "You'll regret this, Emily." But the mansion, once full of pride and noise, now stood cold, echoing with emptiness. Inside, Daniel fell to his knees, gripping the letter. His mother stood frozen, and Sophie stared in silent horror. And miles away, Emily's phone buzzed a message from her lawyer. Eviction completed successfully. She smiled faintly. Justice had a new address, and it wasn't theirs anymore. The mansion's iron gates stood open, the morning sun pouring through like a spotlight on shame. Margaret, Daniel, and Sophie stood at the top of the driveway, the same driveway where Emily had once carried groceries, smiled through exhaustion, and waved goodbye to her husband every morning. Now she returned as a stranger, calm, steady, unshaken. Her black car stopped midway up the drive, engine humming softly. When she stepped out, silence wrapped around them like fog. Margaret was the first to speak, her voice sharp and brittle. "How dare you come here after what you've done? You humiliated my family." Emily met her eyes without flinching. "Your family humiliated itself." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clean, controlled, cutting. Daniel took a hesitant step forward. He looked different now, smaller, lost. His shirt was wrinkled, his face pale. "Emily," he said quietly, "please. We didn't know. Mom thought—" "You never asked," she interrupted. The words hit harder than any scream could. He lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. Margaret's rage only grew. "You tricked my son. You used him. I protected him," Emily said sharply. "From failure, from debt, from himself. Every check that paid for this house, every repair, every bill, came from me. And I never asked for anything back. Until now." Sophie stepped forward, arms crossed, trying to hide her shaking voice. "You can't just throw us out like this. What kind of woman does that?" Emily turned toward her slowly. "The kind of woman your lies built," she said simply. "Enjoyed the luxury, didn't you? Every wall, every floor, all mine." Sophie's face flushed. "You think this makes you better?" "No," Emily replied. "It makes me free." The air grew heavy again. Daniel's lips parted, searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, he whispered, "Emily, I'm sorry." She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since that night. "You pushed me out because someone else told you to. That was the moment I realized you never loved me, you just loved control." He stepped closer, voice trembling. "If I could take it back," she cut him off softly. "You can't." For a moment they stood in silence, the ghost of what once was lingering between them. Then Emily drew a breath, turned toward her car, and said quietly, "I've already forgiven you, but I'll never forget what it taught me." She opened the car door, the metallic click echoing like the end of a chapter. Margaret suddenly shouted, "You'll regret this. You'll crawl back. You'll see." Her voice broke mid-sentence. She staggered backward, clutching her chest. "Mom!" Daniel cried, rushing. Toward her, Sophie screamed. Emily froze for a heartbeat, watching the chaos unfold. Then she took one last look at the house, not with anger, but with release. She whispered under her breath, "Every storm clears the air." Her car engine roared to life. She drove away slowly, the mansion shrinking behind her, leaving Daniel on his knees beside his mother, panic rising, guilt swallowing him whole. And far ahead, the sun glinted off Emily's windshield, a quiet promise that her story wasn't over yet. The mansion was silent. No laughter, no arguments. Just the hollow sound of emptiness echoing through its halls. The grand chandelier hung like a forgotten memory, catching sunlight that no one cared to admire anymore. 2 weeks had passed since the eviction. Grass had begun to grow wild across the driveway. Dust layered the furniture, and the air carried the faint scent of loss. Inside, Daniel stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by moving boxes half packed, half abandoned. His mother, Margaret, sat quietly on the couch, her posture frail, her once commanding voice reduced to whispers. Her eyes looked distant, haunted. Across the room, a pile of letters lay scattered, all stamped final notice. Their accounts had been frozen, their savings drained after Margaret's failed investments. The business contacts she once bragged about had vanished the moment their wealth disappeared. Daniel rubbed his temples, exhaustion heavy in his voice. "Mom, we need to sell something, anything." Margaret looked up slowly. "Sell what, Daniel? The cars? The jewelry? They're not even in our names anymore." Her tone cracked, bitter and defeated. "We were living in a dream that wasn't ours." Her words hung in the air like dust motes, catching what little light remained. A car door slammed outside. Daniel turned quickly toward the window. Sophie stood on the front steps, suitcase in hand. She looked different now. Colder. Sharper. "You're leaving?" Daniel asked quietly, stepping toward her. Sophie didn't look at him. "I didn't sign up for this," she said. "No money, no stability. You're not the man you were when we met." He laughed bitterly. "I was never that man. I was just pretending for you, for her, for everyone." Sophie's lips tightened. "Then I guess the show's over." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking across the cracked stone path, the same path Emily once walked with grace. The front door creaked shut behind her. Silence returned. Margaret let out a faint, broken laugh. "Even she's smarter than us." Daniel didn't answer. He just stared at the walls, at the ghosts of his mistakes, until a faint noise outside caught his attention. A familiar car. He stepped to the window and froze. Emily. She moved with quiet confidence, her black coat flowing behind her as she approached the door with a key. Her key. The officers had already transferred the house back to her name. Now, she had come to reclaim it in person. The door opened with a low click. The sound carried through the empty space like a memory coming home. Daniel stood frozen as she walked in, calm and collected. Her gaze swept across the room, the dust, the emptiness, the faces that once looked down on her. "It's strange," she said softly, "how everything looks bigger when it's hollow." Margaret bowed her head, silent. Emily stepped forward, placed her hand on the front door, and looked at Daniel one last time. "They thought they broke me," she said quietly, "but I was the foundation beneath their feet." With that, she turned the key in the lock click. The sound echoed through every room, final and cold. Outside, the wind stirred the fallen leaves, sweeping them away from the steps as if erasing the last traces of those who didn't belong. Inside, Daniel whispered her name, but she didn't turn back. And somewhere, deep, in the house, a single light flickered back on the sign of a new beginning. The sky burned gold as the sun dipped below the horizon. Emily sat on the balcony of her new penthouse, the city stretching endlessly beneath her. The evening breeze lifted her hair gently, carrying the faint hum of traffic and life. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about survival, only stillness. Her phone lay beside her, the screen glowing softly. A photo her wedding day. She and Daniel smiling, hands clasped, promises made under an arch of white roses. For a moment she studied it quietly, tracing the edges of their frozen happiness. Then, with a calm breath, she whispered, "When you give love, give it freely, but never let it cost your dignity." She pressed delete. The screen went black, her reflection staring back at her older, wiser, freer. Inside, the wind brushed the curtains like a sigh of relief. Every choice, every scar, every quiet night she'd spent, wondering if she was enough, it had led her here. Her voice softened, almost like a letter to her past self. Forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about setting yourself free. She reached for her journal, opened a fresh page and wrote, "I once built a home for love. Now, I build a life for peace." The city lights blinked on below, each one a story, a heartbeat, a reminder that endings are only beginnings wearing different clothes. Emily smiled faintly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in months. In the distance, thunder rolled again, not threatening, but cleansing, as if the sky itself was washing away the past. And as the last streak of sunlight disappeared, she whispered, "Peace is the sweetest revenge." But peace, she knew, was just the beginning. Morning sunlight spilled across a bright community center, laughter echoing off the walls. Emily stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, surrounded by women, some young, some older, all starting over. "Your donation helped us open this place," one volunteer said gratefully. "We call it the Second Key Foundation." Emily smiled, humbled. "It's not just mine," she said softly. "It belongs to every woman who thought she'd never start again." Photos of women rebuilding their lives lined the walls. Lawyers, teachers, mothers, each one carried the same light in their eyes. Emily now had strength after breaking. A camera crew approached her gently for a short interview. "What inspired you to create this fund?" Emily paused, thinking carefully. Then she said, "Because I lost everything once, but what I really lost was myself. And when I found her again, I promised I'd never let another woman forget who she is." The interviewer smiled. "That's powerful." Emily nodded. "They lost a mansion," she said, her tone calm but resolute. "I found myself." Cut to a slow montage. Emily walking through the mansion one last time, before selling it, her footsteps echoing against empty marble floors. She locks the front door, drops the keys into an envelope labeled "Donation Sale, Foundation Fund," and walks away. Her silhouette fades into sunlight as soft piano music swells. The final image, Emily at a small, bright house with open windows. She turns a brand new silver key in a new door. Inside, laughter, warmth, peace. Her voice carries softly over the last notes of music. "Love didn't break me. It rebuilt me." Sometimes losing what you love is how you find who you are. The piano fades into silence and the screen cuts to black. Her story ends, but her legacy begins.